Hello and welcome to another episode of the Federal Church Presents Better Than Bloomberg. Continuing our coverage of the 2023 global financial system collapse, the worst ever. And watching the Fed, pretty much all the other central banks, going all in on making you poor. There was a, or at least for the 99.999%. There was a good note here from Zero Hedge where it talks about how the Fed balance sheet is shrinking, supposedly. And the bank bailout facility somehow was easing. Now don't forget, these banks are still insolvent, and they get more insolvent by the day. So we get to take a look at this, which, well, first of all, I wouldn't be shocked if this were completely fudged. Because basically what you get from the Fed and the BLS and all the other bullshit data, from the government, is worth less than Soviet, statistics, Soviet data. Where the entire Soviet Union was built on fucking lies. And that's what it's come down to in this third world shithole. All they do is lie. I made a nice little video of the dirty little liars too. But I would not be shocked if this was, completely fudged. But aside from that, if you take a look at the numbers, there's probably more to it than what it, first seems, prima facie, your face either. Sorry, the dirty little money changers still telling people to medicate my damn food. Because they're dirty little liars. So, after last week, we saw the Fed's balance sheet shrink significantly back from its, bank bailout resurgence. Again, I don't think that's the case because they're printing shitloads of money one way or another. Especially with Yellen, claiming she's going to backstop 18 trillion of deposits, which she can't possibly do. And even if she did, it makes it, self-defeating. So what if you have the deposits when it's worth nothing in the dollar in which it's denominated? And all eyes will be back on the H41 report this evening to see if things have continued to improve or re-worsen amid regional bank shares unable to bounce above post-SVB lows ahead of earnings. Now again, the banks are insolvent. Their capital reserves, I give the example of the Zions Bank, where 2/3 of their capital reserves are in mortgage-backed securities that don't go into this Fed, facility. And, they don't take that. And it only gets worse by the day, especially when there's a couple other notes, too, about how commercial real estate is imploding. And so will, traditional, or, residential, real estate. And these... That's where the underlying hasn't even blown up. They're just, they're just going to implode now from the interest rate risk because, well, they printed trillions of dollars, and they're trying to print trillions of dollars to stop these bank runs. Where, again, nobody in their right mind would put their money in an insolvent bank. So this week's 30.27 billion inflow means that over the last 5 weeks, and what that really is the recycling from the bigger banks. When the smaller banks and their depositors took all their money out of the smaller banks, and put it into the bigger banks thinking they were safer. Which again is a misnomer because, well, the bigger banks are the ones who conduct the derivatives transactions. And those are all tied to rates. So that's obviously going to be very bad for them. And then that was just money recycled from the smaller banks that the bigger banks took on deposit and then put back into the little banks. So we have seen over 380 billion flow into money market funds, which is the largest ever inflow outside of the COVID lockdown panic. That pushed assets to a record 5.277 trillion, well above the 4.8 trillion pandemic peak. And they flow into money market funds, which is the largest ever inflow outside of the COVID lockdown panic. Which is also funny, because I don't think they figured out how money market funds work yet or who runs them. That pushed assets to a record $5.277 trillion, well above the $4.8 trillion pandemic peak, suggesting the U.S. commercial bank deposits continued to fall. The silver lining there is that the rate of flow into money market funds is slowing, and thus potentially the pace of deposit outflows is also slowing. Though not wanting to piss all over those hopeful fireworks, we note that the reverse repo continues to rise. Again, this was the other facility I was thinking of last time when I was too medicated to think of it. They have more incentive to use that reverse repo facility, or reverse repo window, whatever you want to call it. It's whatever they call it. They're medicated. The most anticipated financial update of the week, the infamous H41, showed the world's most important balance sheet shrank for the third straight week, $17.59 billion. Again, I call bullshit on this too, because I guarantee you PPT printed way more than that. Just that alone, plus whatever shenanigans they're running, trying to fucking keep those banks afloat when they shouldn't. They should be allowed to fail because this wasn't even greed or taking exorbitant risk. These were people that were too stupid to do a very simple task. It was just poor management, and they shouldn't be running the bank. Dramatically less than last week's $73.558 billion tumble, the biggest weekly decline in the Fed's balance sheet since July 2020. Looking at the actual reserve components provided by the Fed, you find that the Fed backstop facility borrowings fell modestly from 149 to 139. Still massively higher than 4.5 billion pre-SVB. And again, you have to take a look at these numbers closely and why that is, right? Because most of the problems are things like commercial real estate, mortgage-backed securities, not just U.S. toiletries. And the only thing covered in that facility is U.S. toiletries. But the composition shifted as the usage of the discount window dropped by 2.1 billion to 67.6 billion. With an 8.2 billion decrease in the usage of the Fed's brand new bank term funding program, 71.8 billion from 79 billion last week, which again is because all of these people already left those small banks. The other part of it is, like Zion's bank, 2/3 of their capital reserves are fucking mortgage-backed securities. And it isn't like in 2008, where some exotic derivative shit that, imploded. These people simply fucked up interest rate risk, and soon the underlying will implode just like in 2008. While the reduction in banks' usage of the by the fucking pivot bailout facility is positive, given the drop in yields and thus rise in mark-to-market value, banks will help the market books. We would have expected a larger decline in emergency facilities usage. It's only declining because people already left the bank. This stuff is already over. This is already 5 weeks into this collapse. There was zero quantitative tightening this week, which of course, they're printing money. Which was last week's big downside driver of the Fed balance sheet. Now we do note that other Fed assets rose by $3.6 billion. And they're going to be printing money. The foreign U.S. dollar funding side of the Fed balance sheet. Reverse repo usage rose $20 billion, and Fed custody holdings of treasuries for foreigners also rose. Again, why is this? Because people weren't dipshits. They got their money out of those, insolvent banks run by dipshits. And now they put it in either foreign banks or something like Bitcoin. Foreign repo, minus $10 billion. Foreign reverse repo, up $16.4 billion. Treasuries held in custody, $12 billion. Liquidity swaps, $6 million. So the continued rise in money market inflows suggests bank deposit flight continues. Of course it is. And again, it's very simple to figure out if your bank is insolvent. Take a look at what I did over at Zion's Bank. Take a look at their balance sheet and what their capital reserves are. And if it's all U.S. toiletries and MBS, which is done by convention, well, your bank is fucking insolvent. So that's pretty much damn near all of them too. And it only gets worse by the day. Because given the environment, the war, the inflation, because of the war, too. Inflation because they have to keep printing money to try to avert a collapse now. The fact that they already printed trillions out, it only gets worse by the day. These mortgage-backed securities, these U.S. toiletries, only get more worthless by the day. And it doesn't matter what stupid little accounting trick that they use. It doesn't matter. Those banks are insolvent. And the only way that they can be bailed out is by the Fed printing money. And they will literally have to print so much money, they're going to implode the dollar. And again, the rest of the world, knowing this, will not be loaning to the fucking deadbeat over there that can't pay their fucking goddamn already trillions of dollars just in interest on their, national or their sovereign debt. Their toiletries. Smaller shrink of the Fed's balance sheet suggests this is far from over yet. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was just saying. Over the coming days, weeks, months, you'll continue to see these banks fail. And if they're bailed out, it can only be done with printed money, because even the Fed is insolvent. The Fed's already way past bankrupt. Silver lining is that emergency usage facilities eased modestly, but remain extremely high relative to pre-SVB. Of course it does. And again, you have to look at that carefully. Take a look at banks like Zion's Bank. Because 3/4 of their stuff is in mortgage-backed securities, which isn't covered by those facilities. So, I thought this was a great little note from Zero Hedge. Because at first glance, it may seem like, everything's okay. Everything's not okay. Those banks are insolvent, and it only gets worse by the day. And if you take a look at the numbers, there was also another one too. Where was it? Where the banks, let's see here. It was such a small number that it was probably what SVB did. Where SVB gave themselves $200 million in loans to their own employees because they knew the bank was going under. And I don't doubt that the other banks were pulling those kinds of shenanigans too. Where was it? It was somewhere in there. Let's see. It might have been a different note, but it was saying, lending increased by something like $2 billion. Where, they probably lent it to themselves, knowing their bank was going under, just like SVB did. And it wasn't run by, complete dumbasses. It was run by the former head of the San Francisco Fed, who knew to be bailed out first. Because if he didn't get bailed out first, he might not have gotten bailed out at all. Yeah, that might have been a different note. But, yeah. So, that's it for now. Don't forget why you're in this mess. Because you didn't donate. make sure to donate to the Bitcoin wallet below there.